So on the Spotfire demo, this first screen provides a view of the consolidated landscape to allow the user to understand the environment that they're working in. So we have 6 legal entities and approximately 410,000 account holders in this data set, which is a mock data set. The rest of the logic within this demo is the same logic we use with our clients. So we start with an overall, high-level view of the account holder FATCA landscape, where we've broken down the clients into some high-level groupings: de minimis, individual, non-individual, and you can go through the financials and non-financials. So at a glance, the user can see where the rest of the FATCA, what we call the FATCA landscape, looks. And since FATCA is a tax initiative, the most important thing in it is getting the right tax form. So understanding which tax forms you have on file, or how many of your accounts already have tax forms on file, is a key piece of information going forward. So here, just across entities and individuals, we've separated the account holders that have tax forms on file and the account holders that do not have tax forms on file. Across the bottom, for this financial institution, this fictional financial institution, there's 6 legal entities, 3 in the United States, 1 in the United Kingdom, 1 in the Cayman Islands, and 1 in Hong Kong. So for the high-level classifications on this page, you see that the numbers at each of those financial institutions. Lastly, for the entities and the individuals, there's a breakdown of which types of tax forms are on file, which does provide information about the workload. For a W-9, it represents a U.S. individual or a U.S. entity, and there's basically 0 workload, or just a small incremental workload. W-8 IMYs, there's the potential to have to identify underlying owners, and that could be multiple levels in an ownership structure. So we wanted to call out the different tax forms that were available to highlight some of the challenges that a client may face. And these are kind of representative views based upon the data that we have available. So the more data fields that are available, regardless of them being incorporated into the logic, we'd be able to drill down into those areas. So let's look at a couple more pages where we're going to leverage Spotfire's drill down capability to learn more about the underlying population. So from a legal entity standpoint, it's important to know what the client's population is and the resources that are going to be required for that population, and potentially the timing of that population. So here across the top, we have the 6 legal entities of this financial institution. The brown triangle is exempt beneficial owners, which is an umbrella category in this instance for 4 subcategories. You can be a central bank, a foreign government, international organization. Drilling down further into the exempt beneficial owner category, into the central bank category, we'd find here's some details on the total number, 7,300, and the breakdown of those with a W-8 BEN and a W-8 EXP. So from a FATCA quality standpoint, this is a good piece of information because we only expect central banks to have BENs or EXPs from a tax perspective. Continuing to go around, we can look at each of the categories here. I've selected the international organizations, and I start to see a variety of tax forms: W-8 BENs, W-8 EXPs, W-8 IMYs. Of course, approximately 8,900. So from a FATCA perspective, as Paul mentioned, this might be important if we want to understand the workload of the entities and make some potential policy decisions on whether we want to continue business with U.S. clients from a certain financial institution, or deny ability, or curtail new business with U.S. clients at those financial institutions. So here we'll take a look kind of at the non-individuals, this section of the population. We have it segmented first in the top left by the financial institutions, by the different legal entities in the financial institutions. So what we want to do on this slide is be able to understand the entity population, and if you remember, there was a much larger entity population within this database than non-individuals. To be able to understand the entity population, to be able to look at the workload associated with that entity population, and potentially some of the details of entities in this segment. So for our largest legal entity, the U.S. Legal Entity 3, the largest population of our clients is U.S.-based. Now here we have the detailed breakdown of the FATCA classifications, and we see that approximately 23% of our population is unclassifiable. So in this instance, unclassifiable means that we know they're foreign, but we don't know whether they're financial or non-financial. And that's a key distinction in FATCA, is being able to split between financial and non-financial. So let's see what information we do have about these clients. We know that they have, from a tax form perspective, here is the breakdown of the 4,900 clients. Nearly 80% have tax forms, which is, if nothing else, it's a start in the remediation process. And if we want to come in further and look at some of the details, here we have a breakdown of all the clients, let's say, that are in this, all 4,900 clients in this section of unclassifiables, where we can start to look at perhaps their account balance, some of their more intimate details that aren't shown here. What is their EIN, legal structure, industry, and if interested in, we could export this into an Excel spreadsheet and give it back to an analyst, outside of this environment, to go back into the source systems to extract additional information, or look for instance, to see if the tax form was present but just wasn't coded appropriately in the source system. Here's a similar view for individuals, also starting with legal entities. And from a workload perspective with individuals, we're most concerned with which individuals have U.S. addresses or U.S. indicia that will require the submission of curative documents. So in this case, the electronic search is showing us that presence of U.S. indicia is going to translate to time and resource commitments during the remediation, which would begin in 2013 or 2014. So for the U.S. Legal Entity 3, again the biggest legal entity, we can get a split of our U.S. individuals across our individuals across individual and non-individual, and whether they have a tax form on file or not on file. So if we look at the non-U.S. individuals with a tax form on file, of the 7,200, approximately 7,100 do have some type of U.S. indicia. So here, from a work planning perspective, 7,100 of these clients are going to require reach out and submission of a curative document such as a driver's license, passport, etc. Now for the small portion, just 82, that do not have U.S. indicia, or I'm sorry, do not have a tax form on file, we see that they have no U.S. indicia at all. So for there's that small portion where if we get a tax form from the client, that should suffice for FATCA. Again, in this view, we've pulled up the individual details, so we could start to, if we wanted to, we could go down further and look at some of the individual cases, or we could export this subset of the larger individual population out to an analyst for detailed review. This last page in the demo is data quality observations, and kind of pursuant to Paul's mention earlier, there was one of the key things the key purposes of this preliminary search and why Spotfire is a great tool to conduct it is that beyond understanding where our data is and what type of workload we could expect from a remediation process of our pre-existing population, getting a view into the data, which has been collected probably fairly regularly but might lack governance processes around it, getting a view into the data and identifying instances where there's a potential conflict, internally between data elements, early enough allows several things to occur. I mean, certainly investigation into why we have this conflict, or potentially a remediation of a field. And very prior to FATCA go live and reaching out to the clients, understanding the accuracy of your data is going to help with the planning and also help ensure that reaching out to the clients from a preliminary classification perspective, you're reaching out to your clients intelligently. And so I'll show you, here's some examples of some of the areas we've seen data inconsistencies within within customer records. This large group right here is the group of central banks. So 28% of this population, and this is a smaller population, it's not the whole 400,000, but 28% of this population has 468, or has a central bank as a Chapter 3 status. So we'd expect them to be a central bank, and we'd expect them to be non-traded, non-publicly traded. But if we come over here, nearly, just over 30% are actually publicly traded in the account file. So this would mean the presence of a ticker symbol or an exchange name, probably in the account file. Maybe it came out of the AML, CIP, background checks that's where the data came from. Kind of regardless of where the data came from, there's, at least the way it's being interpreted right now, it's showing that a central bank is publicly traded. So if we, going further down into this group of publicly traded central banks, we look across at their industry information. So 25 of them have industry information that aligns to their Chapter 3 status. Financial, that's debatable whether it aligns to central bank, and same with foreign government. They could potentially align to a central bank. But it does kind of, as we look over here to non-financial, so we have a central bank, it's non-financial, it's publicly traded. Now we're starting to have a lot of conflicts in these data in the different elements. And if this last drill down allows us to see where these elements, where these instances are occurring. So across which legal entities. So here it is. It's across 5 of the legal entities. U.S. legal entity 1 does not have this problem. But these are, as far as leveraging Spotfire, what we've learned with these initial preliminary classification assessments of clients and planning is that the data is generally more disparate than anticipated, and the data often has more internal inconsistencies than anticipated. By leveraging Spotfire in this process, to assess all available electronic indicia, to provide initial classification of the account holders for remediation planning, and also to identify data consistencies that moving forward beyond pre-existing classification could cause a problem, are the 3 key reasons that we found Spotfire to be effective to support the pre-existing client classification portion of FATCA.